Drink beer, it's good for you.
Hello and welcome to the video. This video is an edited version of a very recent live stream held at the end of August 2022 featuring Keith from Kegland giving the very latest of information about Brewzilla Gen 4. Details are given as to what we can expect now and into the future, including a look at the forthcoming 100 litre Brewzilla Gen 4. Let's now move on to the stream.
We're going to talk about Gen 4 today. In fact, actually, you released a little bit before us in Australia. We have started pre-sale now. We're going to launch it hopefully next week. And we had a lot of good response. So you have some experience now releasing it in Australia. Has there been a lot of interest around it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we've sold out a few times in Australia already. So, yeah, the 35 came online first, and then the 65 very shortly after was released. The 100 litre, which is behind me actually, that's this big boy, over in the corner here. That one is basically, I think, due to come in stock towards the end of the year. And then we'll submit that off for the CE electrical approval testing very soon. So, probably in about maybe 4 months, I would say all of the electrical approvals for CE should be wrapped up, which means then we can start shipping them over to you guys. So sort of, towards the, end of this year, we'll start getting some shipments over to Europe, and then, maybe start of next year or something like that, I guess they might be arriving to you and be distributed. So it's kind of funny, like when we first started, we thought the 35 was the perfect size, and then we've started to see a little bit of a progression to the larger breweries are selling in higher quantities. So now with the 65 litre in Australia, it's becoming such that we're selling almost about similar volumes. It's getting close to similar volumes of 65s to 35s, which is sort of definitely not what we would have expected. But I think partly it's got to do with the brewery itself is becoming more flexible too. So people are able to brew small volumes in a large brewery, and I think they get the added advantage of having that extra power. And to be honest with you, I think all our breweries are such good value as well. I think people look at them and think, oh, that's a bargain. I'll get the more expensive, larger one, and they can kind of afford to go to that step, I guess, as well. So I think there's definitely an element of that too. But yeah, the response has been really good in Australia, and already, to be honest with you, with the older Gen 3, it was already the highest selling brewery in the world. So now with the Gen 4 being more feature packed and having more stuff in there and more accessories that come with the brewery as well, I think it's one of those things where I think it will further sort of push into the front position with being the world's highest selling brewery. So yeah, I think it'll be hard for some of our competitors to keep up, I think. Quietly. Obviously I'm pretty biased saying that, but that's my gut feeling on this one.
So what kind of feature are you most excited about?
Let's get a bit specific about it. So we probably have people here that probably have read a lot about it. Some might already have ordered it, but for someone that this is new for them, but we can start off with they know about the Gen 3. What is new about the Gen 4? If you can perhaps highlight something like the top 3 features that you like about it. And then we can get into a bit specifics for those that don't know about the Gen 3, so we get an overall intro to it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think generally speaking, one of the things you'll first notice is the ergonomics of it. So bringing that controller to a higher level, something that people have been hassling us for quite some time. And certainly from a manufacturing perspective, there's some ease to just put it down near all the other electronics down the bottom. But really, it's much more ergonomic. There's nothing graceful about having to kneel down on the ground and
we've all been there.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. A lot of these upgrades are because we want stuff in the office ourselves. And look, I'm not getting any younger, so I don't want to be kneeling down on the ground anymore.
You don't feel like kneeling anymore.
The other main thing is the bottom elements have had a massive makeover. So by moving the drain to the bottom dead center, it's enabled us to push the ring elements all the way to the full diameter. So we've got a much bigger casting on the base. it does make the elements a bit more expensive to produce. When you have a larger casting and, you know, there's more metal essentially down there, you know, the elements are a bit more expensive, but it's well worth it, I think, because it reduces the overall watt density and really gives you a better result in the brewery as well. So the watt density is the lowest it's ever been. We were already lower than a lot of our competitors with the Gen 3, but then with the Gen 4, it's been reduced even more. So that's been another major thing. And by having the bottom dead center drain, it allows us to do a bit more other stuff. So we actually released a video recently where we had a heat exchanger dish, for instance. So that's where we have a dish which basically pushes the wort in close contact with the elements as it's being drawn out of the pump. So that greatly improves the heat exchange efficiency, which means it helps us do step mashes faster. And that's sort of another exciting feature. Look, things like that were very hard to do without that bottom dead center drain. But now we can, you know, do a few other things like that because it's you know, all symmetrical the way the wort flows past the element and down through the brewery. So that's another major thing. I think being able to get to the pump as well is another major feature. So you'll notice on the underside of the brewery, just got this one over here. I'll pull this extension off. But on the underside of the brewery, you can see the pump and equipment is easier to get to, so just under there. And that means for cleaning and stuff like that, some people who are, you know, very diligent at cleaning and want to take apart the pump every now and then, they can easily get to the pump head. And, you know, if they get hop stuck in there or absolutely accidentally drop something down and it gets sucked into the pump hole or something like that, they can easily get there and open it up. The other thing is it means they can change the plumbing configuration. So some people, I think, have expressed a preference in the past for that, where they don't necessarily, they want to be able to pump out the side tap, or some people want it to, you know, flow out the side tap through gravity. So, you know, you can change around the plumbing configuration really easy. And there's a few other accessories down the track where we might take advantage of that. So, yeah. The Bluetooth bridge and Wi-Fi function is something which is also a fairly substantial upgrade on the controller. So now the controllers, they obviously feed all that information up to the internet, but the Bluetooth function's kind of exciting because there's a lot of accessories that we can make now with this brewery in the future. And with the Gen 4, we have noticed that it's getting harder and harder to make improvements on a brewery. Like now that this Gen 4's released, honestly, I can't see us making a Gen 5, you know, in the near future because we're really running out of things to include in the brewery. But by putting the Bluetooth bridge function on the brewery, it means that we can make other accessories moving forward, which will improve the brewing process and give you better consistency and stuff like that. But you won't have to upgrade the brewery. So the good thing about this is I know a lot of people, when they buy our stuff, we're often bringing out a new model and a new model and a new model, and they're constantly upgrading, you know, on a very rapid. And a lot of people get frustrated, like, oh, no, I just bought the old one and you brought out a new one. How frustrating and stuff like that. But with this particular model, I don't see us upgrading in a hurry. So it's probably a very safe time for you guys to buy a new brewery, knowing that you're not going to have to replace it with another one with more features. Because, yeah, most of the upgrades will be, we're doing ongoing firmware upgrades on the controller. So I think now the controller, you know, even though this brewery's only been out for, like only a few months, really, you know, we're up to sort of the 9th build of the firmware on the controller. So it's sort of like, you know, you can see the firmware is moving at a very fast pace. And a lot of other accessories like this are coming out because it's got Bluetooth. And I probably have to explain that a bit better, actually, because Bluetooth, when most people think about it, think, oh, Bluetooth, that's so I can connect the brewery with my phone. And look, really, that's not the whole end game for us because it's already connected to the internet. Why would you need to connect directly with your phone via Bluetooth? I mean, your phone's connected to the internet, so it makes more sense for, you know, if you really wanted to see what's going on in the brewery, you could go via the internet, not because obviously with Bluetooth it only works within 10 meters. But the Bluetooth bridge function is really handy because then we can use control sensors like this. So, for instance, this is another temperature sensor, and we can drop this into the top of the brewery and then get actually a core mash temperature reading. So that's really exciting. In fact, when we made this, I was actually dumbfounded that nobody has really done this before in any other single vessel breweries. It's almost crazy to think that all the single vessel breweries on the market, all they do is take a temperature right down near the bottom, near the element. So that small amount of wort just sitting underneath the mash tun, it's the only temperature probe which we're getting a read on. And sort of, as much as, we think it's all the same temperature, there is a substantial temperature differential, especially when you're increasing the temperature, the substantial temperature differential between that small bit of liquid down the bottom and then the whole malt pipe. So, often the best inventions, I think, are when you get something, you're like, how come this didn't exist before? And you have that moment of like, why didn't this exist? And I think having a secondary probe so you can get information from both the core malt pipe and the bottom element temperature is exactly one of those moments where, now that this product is available, it just seems crazy that it hasn't existed.
One other new improved feature is probably the better word for it, is the dead space in the brewery. On the previous version and a lot of the similar products out there, you have to always calculate for a lot of dead space around the mash tun and under it. So on a 65 liter, you can often end up with 8 liters or something you have to calculate in. But on this one, that's almost non-existent in comparison.
That's exactly it. Yeah, we did increase it's sort of, you get two wins out of that. So decreasing the dead space means you don't have to calculate into your formula. But yeah, as you say, Carlson, the nice thing about it is it brings the whole malt pipe down lower. So that way we can have a much larger malt pipe. So it makes it more suitable for very high gravity beers and makes it better for doing it. Actually, it's kind of by decreasing the dead space, we can do large batches more efficiently because that way we can fit more malt in the malt pipe without it kind of overflowing. But then also we can do very small batches. So you can also decrease the amount of malt in the malt pipe and it's still submersed under the liquid. So it gives you this great degree of flexibility. And I think maybe that's also one of the reasons, as I was saying before, why people have gone to upgrade to a larger brewery as well. Because they're like, oh, well, I get the large one. I can still really efficiently do, single batches as well. And there's no sort of drawback there. So
I believe David Heafy actually tested as far down as 5 liter brewery on the 65, which is just ridiculous, but it works. That kind of tells you the story about that dead space, that you can do that before it was never work. But for our customers, I think at least they have availability to do a half batch on the 65, just to be able to do that with no problems. That's for some, that will be a big reason to go for the 65, so they don't get locked to that double batch all the time.
Yeah, definitely. And really, it's so easy because most people have the 15 amp, at home as well. So I don't think it's a power constraint. I mean, certainly in America, I think we'll still see a lot more of the 35s because they've got a bit of a power problem as soon as they go, over
I guess
that
Sweden
large
is kind of in
limit.
the same situation. Right?
So Sweden is the same. We see that the sale of the 35 is a lot bigger in Sweden than compared to us in Norway. We sell more or less 50-50 as you do in Australia. The pre-sale has been like that, and probably the sales in the future will also be like that. So that's probably why I did notice that in Norway. It's the 15 amp sockets are pretty common.
16.
It's definitely not like that over 16. Sorry. Yep. So we've got a number of other features though. We're also working on things like the CIP's spray rotor. So that's something that will be on some of the new breweries. We're not sure if we'll just sell it as an add-on extra or have this included. But basically, it's like a rotor which will attach to the arm, so that way you can wash out the brewery itself. So that's something that I've been working on for a little while and just playing around, optimizing it, making tweaks to the tooling and stuff like that. So that's another exciting feature for people who basically want to wash out the brewery and not have to get in there and scrub it down and stuff like that. So that's another thing which wouldn't have really been possible unless we made it the center drain. So because if we had that liquid just sitting in the bottom of the brewery, it doesn't really suit CIP very well because you can't really rinse out those bits of hops and the chunky bits, which basically just continually just sort of circle around in that sort of bit of liquid. So the center drain has been great in that sense too. We have got that other product, the heat exchanger dish as well. So that'll come online in Australia fairly soon. As I was saying just before, it's another piece which basically sits underneath the pump false bottom screen. So basically that means that wort will get pushed underneath the false bottom and then pushed right up against the element. So it's got a 7mm gap between where the pump sucks the wort in. It's getting all the wort to pass through that 7mm gap before it goes up the recirculation arm. So that's another exciting product. If you guys are into doing, I know a lot of people are just doing single infusion. So for a lot of ales and stuff like that, it's fine, and probably single infusion is no problem. But for some people who are still doing, let's say, a Pilsner and wanting to do an acid rest or something like that and aggressively stepping the temperature up, I think it's a huge benefit to be able to use a screen like that, because it greatly improves the efficiency of how quickly you can step up the temperature. As I was saying before, the controller on the brewery will be able to pick up, another sensor like this. But inside the controller, we've actually designed all the hardware and the databasing behind it, so it can take up to 8 Bluetooth, sensors that come in. So even though you can fit quite a lot more malts in the brewery, you can also buy an extendable malt pipe as well. So look, even if the larger malt pipe that comes stock standard with the brewery is not enough for you, I'm 100% certain that if you buy the extended malt pipe, it will be, well and truly enough. Yeah. Because the extended malt pipes are humongous.
If we keep within just the standard setup. Like we mentioned before, the dead space has been greatly removed. So the mash tun itself takes up more of the space. So comparing it to the Gen 3, there's a lot more room now.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. So when you pull out the malt pipe, like this, you can see how, so that's obviously where the elements are. I don't know if you can see really well there, but the elements are this sort of seam line here, and you can see how close it gets down to the bottom there. It really uses up the entirety of the space, basically. Right. As you can see there. So it's very, very hard for us to, as I was saying, we've been through a lot of optimization with this brewery, and it's now getting extremely difficult to find even small areas we can optimize.
But you did a lot of details on the mash tun itself too, actually. Like you have those stepping lids on the side, so you don't have to pull it all the way up. You can actually do it just halfway and let it pour for a bit, and then do the rest. For efficiency and stuff like that, that should be an improvement.
Yeah, definitely.
And obviously,
yeah,
everyone is probably putting their eyes on the bottom of it now. If you lift it up a bit, this part.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
That's a huge improvement.
Sort of, little perforations at the bottom.
Right.
We did a lot of playing around. It took ages to get to this exact level, but we made a whole lot of different malt pipes with varying number of holes. So we had holes in the bottom centimetre, 2 centimetres, 3, 4, and we actually had holes all the way up the side. But you do get to a stage where if you just keep increasing the holes, you end up with just the loss of efficiencies, because you get to a point where instead of the wort coming in and running through, the majority of the grain, it starts just coming in the top and going out sideways. So when you start, and that probably, I guess we always assumed that would be the case, but we spent a lot of time testing that to find where the sweet spot was with the number of perforations. But so now when I'm using the Gen 4, I don't really add much in the way of rice holes as well. I rarely add any. So even when I'm using things like, which are quite sticky, like quite a lot of the hazies that I brew these days, I'm putting in quite a lot of oats. And even with quite a lot of oats in there, I'm not really finding an issue with stuck sparges at all. Sometimes it runs a little bit slow, but generally, even with the pump circulating, another nice thing is the pump circulation speed is by percentage. So it pulses the pump on, so you can actually get a more repeatable, flow rate through the malt pipe, I suppose. But generally speaking, even with the oats added, I can still get a flow rate of about 30% pump speed. So, you know, that's a, you know, reasonable speed that, you know, I can still, you know, step mash and get good level of recirculation and heat up on the mash tun with a 30% speed.
Right.
Yeah.
Also, a small other detail there, you removed the pipe in the middle now, the overflow pipe.
Yeah, it's sort of something that came from a lot of customers' requests, really, because you know, that overflow pipe, originally it's because when the liquid level gets to a certain level that you want to, you know, you want somewhere for the liquid to go if you had the pump on, you know, full bore. But the reality is when people were using the brewery, most people were adjusting the little ball valve on the side of the arm such that they were tuning the flow down so it would never really overflow down that pipe. And look, I guess with so many people doing that, it didn't make sense to keep that pipe down the middle in the malt pipe. So, yeah, that's all been removed. And for some time, even with the older Gen 3, we actually sold an upgrade kit, which was to remove that, you know, pipe, I suppose. And a lot of people are getting that upgrade kit.
Professional false bottom. Yeah, but that's true. It was kind of a thing where after you had brewed like 2 or 3 times, you got so used to the flow on the side that I guess we mostly just kept it plugged in, to be honest.
It's always in the way when you're going to stir and stuff.
Yeah.
It's always there and you're like annoyed because you want to do a good stir and then you have to go around.
Yeah, around it. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so
it's similar with
that was a good improvement, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's similar with the top screen. We still have the top perforated screen, but a lot of people don't even use the top screen as well. So it's one of those things that we probably get about half people use it, half people don't. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe the top screen might get, you know, removed at one stage. But I mean, some people worry about if they have the pump recirculating, the wort's going to channel too much. If the pump hits the top of the wort and then channels through. So that's why we've still kept the top screen in there. But, you know, it's sort of... Yeah, I'm not really sure if that's going to be around long term or not.
If we go into the specifics for RAPT on Brewzilla 4, how would you describe the features there?
Yeah, well, in the next few weeks, we're actually working on a fairly major change on the portal, and this will be a change on the firmware on the controller as well. Often what happens is when we do a big upgrade on the portal, we still have to then upgrade the firmware on the controller. So it's a good idea every now and then to make sure that you connect your brewery to the internet and then just check for firmware updates because, you know, we got constant, firmware which is coming out with more improvements and features and stuff like that. So one of these next ones that are coming out in a few weeks is this more complex profiles. So up until now, all the profiles have been very basic, I suppose. So you basically just set how many minutes you want to step at this particular temperature, and then you can step it up for another 15 minutes, you step it up by a few degrees, and then a few minutes step it up or whatever, and then you mash out. But with the new profiles, they're a lot more complex. So you can set alarms throughout the profiles. So you can have push notifications go to your mobile phone. You can also have different start conditions and end conditions in the profile. So instead of just going for a certain number of minutes, you can have a certain event basically start the profile. So when you get to a certain temperature, it'll then basically start a particular step. So it's not necessarily starting exactly in 15 minutes. It's like, you know, start this step when the temperature hits 65 degrees, for instance, or something like that. So
it seemed
there's more complex profiling.
Really flexible. And we did some testing here and we noticed a few things right ahead. Like you can set it to don't do anything until you have clicked the button. We really appreciate that in the store here because we can't really... always plan when all the customers comes at the same time and it starts to boil and we haven't removed the mash tun and all that. So
exactly.
Just having that, just click, yes, I'm ready. Ready. Much appreciated.
Yeah. It's also kind of handy for hop additions as well. If you basically program in your hop additions, it basically won't proceed until it's like confirm I'm actually pouring the hops in now and stuff like that.
So you don't forget.
Yeah. But also on these more complex profiles, it hasn't just been for the brewery. Like you'll notice that we've tried to make the architecture of the RAPT platform so once people are familiar with making a profile of the brewery, that is translatable to other devices. So things like the RAPT fermentation chamber or the RAPT temperature controller. So if people have got a temperature controller controlling like a fermentation process, you can also make the temp controllers with with the same profile. Well, not the exact same brewing profile, obviously. You can't use a brewing profile for fermenting, but the way you're designing the profile is the same. So you can have a different start and end condition. So for instance, with a temp controller, you can say, I want to start this 18 degree diacetyl rest, let's say. So let's say you're doing a fermentation. I want to start this diacetyl rest when the gravity velocity reaches a certain point. So that means when the fermentation starts to slow down, I will automatically jump up to a higher temperature. So rather than saying, I want to jump up to a higher temperature, on Wednesday or Thursday next week, it's more smart than that and can use, for instance, information from the pill to then set it up. So I think the new profiles will allow more interconnectivity of the various devices together like that. So that's one of the major reasons why we had to upgrade the profile process, is because we're getting now so many new devices on the horizon which need to work with each other.
Regarding RAPT and the Brewzilla 4, I see there's actually quite a few questions coming in. People are really interested in this. You probably know where I'm going. Integration with Brewfolder.
Yes, yeah, definitely. It's an ongoing battle to keep sort of pushing the integration, because look, I love the Brewfolder platform. It's something that Thomas has done a great job, and every time I speak about Brewfolder, that guy has really made a fantastic platform. And we're very, very enthusiastic to keep working with Thomas. But the reality is we've got so many new updates. So for instance, with these new temp controllers, one of our next job is we have to basically get the data with this go up onto the Brewzilla, and then basically feed both temperature readings up to Brewfolder as well. So that way you get a graph seeing both the core mash temperature and the temperature taken at the bottom of the brewery.
Yeah, so instead of just aligning them, combining them, you actually want to send both.
Exactly, want to send both. So that's something that we have to basically speak to Thomas again to update the API calls so he can get both temperatures go up. But it's something that we already have Brewfolder integration, and I think we've got just as much integration as everybody else. But now that we're getting all these extra data sets coming in from other sensors, and the pill now works with the things like the temperature controller, so we're going to do the same thing. We've got to basically get both sets of data, and then that basically goes up with one API call, which calls all of the data, and then Thomas will have to then work out how he's going to display that on his end. So, it's one of those things that, certainly there is integration, but where there's more and more integration that still needs to be done. So it's an ongoing job, I suppose, with integration these days. It's kind of funny, when we first started making the whole RAPT system, it was like, oh, look, we just want something that just connects the internet and just shows the temperature, and that's it. And then it's sort of the bracket creep on this project has, blown way out of proportion. So
it's like when you get into a home smart house system and you just want something that turns off the lights. It's funny. Been there.
Yeah, it's funny. It's exactly it. Just like starting home brewing, thinking, "Oh, I'm going to save money by home brewing," and
all right,
it doesn't always work out quite like that.
Awesome. We can get a little bit into more advanced settings on Brewzilla 4. One of the parts there is you actually have full control of the PID algorithms. Could you talk tiny little bit about PID algorithms? Just for
sure. Well, definitely. PID's something that inherently PID is kind of a bit complicated, and it kind of frustrated me that we're starting to see people sort of throw this word around PID, thinking that you just basically hit this button, it turns PID on, and it works great. And it's like, PID doesn't work like that. If you study engineering, you can spend an entire semester on PID because it's that complicated to set up, right? So, you need to, it's not just simply an on-off feature. If you want to use PID properly, you really have to sort of tweak the settings and be able to set it up properly. And that is especially the case if you're talking about doing, small batches and large batches in the same brewery, because you can't just have one on-off feature just going to work, between, as you were saying before, like David Heath, he did like this batch where he did 5 litres. If you got a PID algorithm which works at like the full volume, 60 litres of the brewery or whatever, and then try to use it in 5, the PID would just be all over the place. It wouldn't work. It would actually cause you a lot of havoc and not work properly. So it's something that you need access to those controls so you can tweak it. And also the way you use the brewery, some people, don't use any oats. So they'll recirculate the pump really fast. And then, the PID settings for someone like that are going to be different to somebody who only has a 20% pump recirculation rate. So, things like that, I think it really is necessary for people to be able to get into the settings and change the PI and the D settings. So I did make a little short video on that. And look, if you want to try to simplify it, you certainly can simplify it a little bit, and you don't have to put all the P, I, and D coefficients in there. I mean, you can just use the P coefficient, and you'll get probably, quite good results just by tweaking one number. So, but if you want to get really tweak it in so you bang on and, you're pumping up the power, but then it's just reducing as it hits that temperature, then it's better to do both the P and the I coefficients and tweak both of those settings in there. So, look, it's a PID algorithm, the PID feature that we've got in there. I feel very happy that it's in there in a format which I like, because I think it has been in home brewing. Unfortunately, it's been generally grossly oversimplified in a lot of other systems out there. So that's something that's in there. It's also on other devices too. So. It's also inside things like the temp controller and the fermentation chamber and stuff like that use the same algorithm. So if you want to get into it, it's worth learning, especially if you're getting multiple RAPT devices. It's worth, I think, learning how the PID algorithm works and learning how to tweak it a little bit.
So there's a question there if the steam condenser is going to work on the new Gen 4, the one that was on the free one, and that the answer to that is yes.
Yeah, and I was actually going to get a bit into, we have all these boiler extensions and all that stuff. You kept the same diameter, right? So all these things that are expected to fit on a Gen 3 should fit on a Gen 4, correct?
Yeah.
If you want to change the lid or whatever.
Definitely.
Right. And as a business model, it's not very good, but as a customer-friendly model, is really good. I mean, there's a lot of people that really loves that you can actually use the old equipment, so you don't have to buy new equipment that you just bought before for the older versions.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. It's definitely in our ethos of always trying to get the most out of the equipment. I mean, as every now and then we have to bring out a new item which has extra feature sets which is hard to make backwards compatible, but wherever possible, we try to make stuff backwards compatible. I mean, there's no reason not to. I mean, the last thing we want is to create extra landfill where people are just, upgrading every year and then putting stuff in the bin. Right. It's really kind of criminal to do that. But yeah, the boiler extensions are quite handy. So I've seen some people, even on the 65, do 100-litre batches on that brewery. Or even, for instance, with the Brewzilla 100-litre, once you put on extensions, you'll be able to go quite large. You're really only limited on the power, essentially, and essentially, eventually get to a point where you don't have sufficient power to get a good rolling boil. That's probably really the only kind of limitation, I guess, because every time you add an extension on, you get a little bit more heat loss, I guess. That's probably the best way to look at it. So I think on average, for instance, if you've got a 35-litre and you add one extension on, if you fill the liquid volume up to that extension, it'll probably increase the heat loss by about 100 watts. And if you've got a Brewzilla 65, I don't actually have one behind me, but if you've got a 65 and you put the extension on, might be like 150 watts worth of heat loss. So if I've got 2 or 3 extensions, it's, the heat loss starts to get substantial and it starts to affect how, effective boil you get. So yeah, that's actually, really the only.
I actually wanted to ask you a bit more about the 100-litre. People are probably a bit curious about that. So where are we in development on that?
So with the 100-litre, we've pretty much got the brewery all finished. It's more now about electrical approvals. So I think the electrical approvals for Australia, because we always start the Australian stuff first, the electrical approvals are a little bit ahead for Australia. So I think the electrical approvals should be finished probably in about another month, in which case we'll start ordering them, and then they'll arrive to us in Australia probably before Christmas. But I think for you guys, because the electrical approvals a little bit further behind, yeah, hopefully early next year or something like that, the 100 litres will be available for you. But yeah, sorry to put all this new gear in here. It's probably one of the frustrating things when you see all these new toys and you're like, oh, I can't get it until like another few months or next year. How annoying. But yeah, it's one of the biggest problems on our YouTube channel. We always bring out a lot of new stuff on the channel, and then one of the most common questions is, oh, when's it going to be in Norway? And it's like, oh yeah, sorry guys.
Power supply for the 100. How much? How much is necessary to run that?
Yeah, so all the breweries, we try to specify the heating elements so we can heat up by 1 degree at the full volume of the brewery. We try to specify that you can heat the temperature up by at least 1 degree per minute. So that means with the 100 litre, we end up with about a 6.6 kilowatt. So inside the brewery, it's got 3 10 amp elements in there. So look, we have had a couple experiments with potentially having, it is quite a lot of power. So if you run it on a single phase, you'll need about a 32 amp socket single phase. Or if you're running it on 3 phase, it's 10 amp over each phase. So that's probably the best way to look at it. It's quite easy to switch between the two. So if you want to switch between single phase and 3 phase wiring, you can just you just flip it upside down, and then you have to just take off one terminal bridge, and then basically, we put an instruction sheet on our website. So because we realize that some people are probably going to have access to a 32 amp single socket. Typically, a 32 amp single phase socket is what a lot of people have in their kitchen, where the electric induction hob or something that is. So generally, if you come off that power supply, you'll be able to run it. Or
it's usually not something you have an extra of.
Yeah. So, you might have to get rid of the kitchen at home to put the brewery in, I think.
Great. But the key feature there is you can actually just use 3 regular sockets instead.
You could, yeah. So you could technically just get 3 cables and plug it in. I don't know what the regulations are in different countries of having it would look like a funny octopus or something like that, I guess, with 3 cables coming out. But, technically it could be done, and it's not going to harm the brewery at all if you were to just plug three sockets in, I guess. But I don't know what the regulations are it would be hard to get that CE approved, I would think. But even though if you were really desperate, you could wire it up like that, I think.
I actually noted down a question that came in earlier regarding RAPT.
Yep.
Is it possible to register one brewery to more than one RAPT user? Say they are sharing the device?
Actually, that's something, it's not so much, it'll still only have one person technically own the device, but yeah, we've got another feature where you'll be able to share devices.
Right.
Sorry. So once that feature is available, definitely that'll be possible. We have had this question for some businesses as well, because we've got some breweries and stuff like that using the equipment in the brewery, and it's shared by multiple people. And I know that's a bit of a frustration. So that is an upgrade which is on there. I must say we've also got a fairly active GitLab. Maybe I'll send that link to you, Carlson. So
sure.
The GitLab is actually an area where people are posting up. It's got like a public page where people are posting up firmware upgrades they want to see and software upgrades. And that's quite active with people putting up posts there. So if you want to see a certain software feature, you can go onto that page, and then you can, log an idea. People can vote on the idea, and basically it gets prioritized based on how many votes it gets.
Oh, that's great.
And the other thing is people can see the progress of various other firmware updates which are already planned and, in progress. So, but that's certainly the share feature is something which is already planned. So that will happen in the imminent future.
Related to that, for those that are interested in the more advanced side of RAPT, you actually made a different Facebook group just for RAPT, correct?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, so there's a different Facebook group. It sort of was something which was we wanted to have a different Facebook group because we had sort of concerns in there for people who had more technical inquiries and wanted to talk more about the technical side of the electronics and stuff like that. And not every home brewer is sort of necessarily into the gadgets. So yeah, we thought it would make more sense to have a separate group for the RAPT stuff, especially. Because you know, just to keep sort of the two markets segregated. I know it's a bit odd to have multiple different groups, I guess, but I think it probably just made more sense in that particular instance.
Yeah, for the technical side of it, it makes a lot of sense to let them have their own forum for it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So definitely jump on that one if you want to see what other people are doing with the RAPT devices. Yeah, have a look, because you know, I think one of the really cool things is really I know I keep bringing this up, but the temp controller, because it's so multi-function, like especially at the moment, it's just got a temperature probe, but you know, there's other sort of Bluetooth sensors that will be able to link with that device. And with the new profile settings, you can have timers go on and off. So for instance, at home, I've started to use this with the hydroponics. So basically it can have like a pump cycle on. So it basically comes on for about 5 minutes every hour. And then this one comes on like that over another different type of profile. And then with this one here, I basically got this controller, you know, using it to control a heating element to keep a temperature at a certain thing. So it can be used for, you know, all sorts of different stuff, really, not just fermentation temperatures.
There's a lot of people asking about the zip rotator when it's arriving, and I guess as soon as you are finished with the tooling, I guess the production will go pretty fast, and we will definitely bring it up by air. So I think if we say in 6 weeks' time, 8 weeks' time, it's probably here. Don't you think so?
Yep. Yeah, definitely. That's one thing that, some of these small parts, we sort of, there's sometimes a bit of a cascading number of products which have to get finished, because we wanted to make sure we were 100% set on the size of the 100 litre and the dimensions of the 100 litre Brewzilla, because we wanted to make sure that this essentially was something which was effectively going to work with all three models. So then you could use the SIP with the 100 litre. So we sort of needed to finish that first before we went to tweaking this product, I guess. So that's sort of one of the reasons why it's taken a little bit longer. You know, wherever possible, we try to make all our products as compatible as they can be across the range. So, you know, once again, you're not having to, if you necessarily upgrade one thing, you don't have to chuck everything in the bin. You just basically got all these compatible parts which work together.
I remember you had a bit of a fun story about Gen 4 when you were here. You actually use it as a smoker.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's kind of funny.
For those watching, do not use the Brewzilla 4 as a smoker. You will break the warranty, but we do not take responsibility for if you do what Key is about to tell you. Right.
But it's one of those things that I think it's come up a few times where people are worried that we have elements which are built into the base of the brewery. So, you know, you can't just sort of take the element, swap it over for another one. And some people say, oh, what about if the element burns out? Like, then I'll be stuffed. And it's like, well, firstly, we've sold like, you know, tens of thousands of these, you know, every year. And basically, we just don't see any burnout. And it's like, it's a zero return rate for the burnout elements. But even though that is the case, and I know they're not burning out, like I thought, well, can I burn it out? Let's see if I can absolutely destroy it. So what I did is I first was like, okay, well, it's meant to be operated at 100 degrees. It's got a thermal cutout at 165, so it can't get above 165. Otherwise, the bimetal thermal cutout will shut the temperature and won't let it go any higher than that. But let's rip all those safety features out. Let's rip out the controller. I'll put on a K-type thermocouple, and I'll just push the temperature way up. So first thing I did is like, I'll turn it to a deep fryer. I had this enormous, it actually was quite a lot of oil. I filled up, actually had a 65 litre, so filled up a 65 litre with oil, and that was like heaps of oil. Actually, it took a while to heat up. I wouldn't say it's a great deep fryer, to be honest with you, but filled it up, had to make a custom, I got one of the malt pipes. I basically chopped it up, put mesh around it, and then made this massive deep fry basket so I could deep fry enough chips for about 300 people, basically, with this thing out. It was like shitloads of deep fried stuff. So that was the first thing I did. So I was able to push the temperature up to like, you know, 220, 230 degrees in the deep fryer. And I ran it for hours and hours. And I was like, hey, it's still not burning out. So I was like, okay, let's see if I can push it further. The only way I can get it further is I'm going to have to use the elements and use them dry. So basically put nothing on them at all. So I basically said, well, maybe I can turn it into a smoker. So basically I took all the oil out of it, and then I just powered the elements, and then had nothing. Obviously, now all our instructions says do not boil dry. You'll destroy the elements. So look, it's still, don't get me wrong, you still should not boil the elements dry. But anyway, have all the safety features removed, all that stuff out, start heating it up. And it was working fine. I basically had it sitting at like well over 200 degrees, using it essentially like an oven with the elements on. And then I also had another device, which is a smoke generator. So I took out the tap from the side and then blew smoke into the side of it. So essentially I had like it heated electronically to get the temperature right for smoking, but then also had smoke blown in the side based on a little timer. So it'd run for an hour, and then the whole process would shut down. But yeah, it was pretty interesting. But one thing I can say is it's just not a risk. Like burning out the elements is something which I'm 100% convinced that you'll find it extremely difficult to do unless you're using it way outside of its normal conditions. I did some ribs in there, did some fish in there as well, and a few other things. It was it worked pretty well. I've since upgraded my smoker, but it definitely was fun to sort of see what type of punishment I could throw at it. Definitely, all of you customers out there, if you've got any other ideas and stuff like that you want us to make, always just put them forward and fire it off. We always love to hear from you as well. So, make sure from the customer's perspective that, if you've got anything you want or anything you want changed or upgrades or, things you find frustrating you want fixed, just let us know, because we're very responsive to that type of stuff. And, it's our full-time job to make sure that we're making the gear as best as it possibly can be. So, we'd love to hear from you.
Okay. Yep. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
See you later.
Cheers.
Have a nice day.
Okay. Bye-bye.
I do hope that you found this video useful, informative and interesting. If so, why not consider liking and subscribing? For further support, you can join the channel's Facebook group, and if you would like to support the channel, then check out the channel's merchandise store, as all profits go back into the channel. Until next time, happy brewing!